One of the really popular ways of pike fishing nowadays is to use bait poppers to pop your bait up well off the deck in amongst weed. It's a great presentation, like I say, when you've got weed beds and you want to be able to present that bait just above or right in the eye shot of any pike. Over the last few years, I've been experimenting a little bit more with popping dead baits up, but not too high, just actually popping them up directly off the bait of the tail. And I honestly believe this makes a big difference. You would have seen videos of pike where sometimes they'll approach a bait but they won't quite commit. Twitching a bait can induce that bite straight away and it can really trigger them. Now if you imagine that bait sitting on its tail just wafting gently, as soon as a pike flares its gills and just moves a bit of water, that bait will waft itself and that will act as its own trigger for the pike to strike. Now when it comes to the way I set the rig up, pop-ups can be a little bit awkward. Some people don't always know how to set it up. I've been playing around for a few years with different ways to connect pop-ups, and I've come up with a way which works well for me, and it may well for you as well. So if we just look at the rig to start with, this is very simple. So I've got one of the large run rings on here. This is just going on about 6 foot of 0.9 fluorocarbon. That is then tied to the quick change swivel. Obviously buffer bead here, and then sleeve. You've got your main trace coming down here. Now this trace I can use just a standard dead bait, hard on the bottom. What you will notice on this trace is I've just crimped gently a little loop of wire in there. So you've basically got this small loop. Now the reason behind that is when I connect my pop-up, I use this little loop to attach it to. So let me show you. First thing, when it comes to poppers, in the past, we've always done them bright red. That's a great colour, and quite often it can be a trigger point. The pike see that red, and it can be another reason for them to actually attack the bait. But we've seen lots of videos of pike rejecting baits, and sometimes I do feel that even though these are great on the right day, other days you need something a little bit more subtle for them to be able to take. And that is why we've also, as well as the red poppers, we've now brought in these light grey ones as well, which are very neutral colour and generally blend in with a dead bait. Now, what you'll see here is the little pop-up rigs I make at home. So, small quick clip on the bottom, that is then pulled through the bait and then clipped onto the trace, like you'll see in a second. You've got a wire link, so obviously this is the area here which will be outside of the bait, so if a pike does take it, it's not going to bite it off. And then what you've got here is a medium and a small poly ball, and the idea behind this, that's actually on a small loop of pole elastic. So when I pull that through the bait, it will stretch just like so, and when that goes into the bait, when it clips on the bottom, that will hold it in position. So you're never going to end up with your dead bait here and your poly ball somewhere up here where it pops out the bait. It's always going to stay nicely tucked in inside the bait and keep it out of the way. So if I just set this mackerel up, this is a perfect bait. All you need to do is kind of cut that to the right size. Perfect. So needle goes through the bottom of the mackerel. That will then come out straight through the middle. Then hook on the quick clip. Pull that down. Now these two, obviously having a small one and a medium one, that just helps it to just sit perfectly inside the bait. So if you look at that now, just look at that, that's now gone in there perfectly. And now as you can see, you've got the clip coming out the bottom, but that's got some movement in it now. Just a little bit, but just enough so that when I actually take the treble hooks, I do it on the opposite side to where the bait's coming out on the pop-up. Clip on there. Just nick it there. Now, this one now just clips on, just like so. But now there's just a small amount of tension there, just enough to keep that bait in. But you can see that is a really, really critically bad, well, that'll be popped up just like this. And if I was to leave it as it is now, that would pop up off the lead. But what we're actually going to do, we're going to add one of our new pop-up weights, which have been designed just for this. So yeah, the small pop-up weights, these actually came, the idea came from when I was using the small pop-up weights what the carp boys use. Now, obviously they're a lot smaller because they're only made for like just critically balancing pop-ups. But these were popping up a decent sized bait. But they're quick change, so you take the weight, it's got a slit down the side. You then take some elastic, but then it goes through it, and that elastic then will hold that in place. And you can then just pull the elastic through slightly. I always leave a little bit showing either end, because if you cut them too short, you'll never get the elastic back out of them again. But yeah, so you can see what you have now is it's still very simple. Like, there's nothing to it. There's a little bit more to create. These pop-up stems, I just make them when I'm at home. Really simple to make. Like I say, I just use pole elastic. But now, that bait will just sit off its tail, just like that. And it's perfect. And that'll just be kind of sitting there like this. Even in the still water, there's always a little bit of undercurrent and movement. And if a pike comes up, flares its gills, that bait's gonna move, properly waft around, and that'll just trigger it into striking. So, that is basically it. That is the way I deal with pop-ups now. And like I say, if I wanted to pop that directly off the lead, I would just take this weight off and I would just have it popped up the length of the trace, and that's absolutely fine. If you want to make the bait even more buoyant, obviously you just go down the route of using a larger poly ball. So whichever colour you feel like you need on the day. I'm really starting to like these grey ones, but at the same time I've had so many big pike on the red ones, they can't be ignored either.